Okay, the next film on the list is a film that probably needs no real introduction. Released at the very end of the 70s, released right in the tail end, 1979, Alien.
Oh,
Now, Alien, in my eyes, is a horror film. It's a sci-fi horror film that kind of, at its core, it's kind of a slasher movie in space.
I agree. In fact, even Ridley Scott said he took some inspiration from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to try and create that claustrophobic atmosphere.
Yep, and it does a great job of conveying claustrophobia. It's very deftly directed by Ridley Scott. I would say that it probably still is Ridley Scott's best film to date, arguably. That or Blade Runner for me. I think the Xenomorph is just one of the greatest creations in the history of horror. Created by, H.R. Geiger. It's a film that, again, classic case of less is more. You don't actually see much of the alien itself until the end of the movie. What's your take? Alien's one of your favourite films of all time, isn't it?
Oh, it's the film that changed my life forever. It was. I watched it on video. My father said, "Okay, son, we will watch this film, but you've got to watch it with me." Okay. And then about 10 minutes later, he says, "I need to sort a few things, son. I'll be back soon." So I watched the rest of the film on my own, and every time I've seen the film on the big screen at least 4 times now, and the scene with John Hurt. Still a visceral reaction. A great cast as well.
Yeah.
You got Tom Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright, who was in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, as you mentioned earlier. The great Harry Dean Stanton as well.
Yeah.
And of course, you got Sigourney Weaver as well.
Yeah.
I know there are a couple of cast members I've sadly missed out on that. However, Sigourney Weaver, her character of Ellen Ripley would go on this amazing transformation in the film Alien, and then would become this incredible icon in the sequel. But with Alien in itself, though, wow, it really does show. Sci-fi horror is a relatively niche genre. It's not necessarily the most marketable of all genres. Alien really made it work.
It did, and it obviously put, as you say, Sigourney Weaver on the Hollywood map, because in the original script, her character was going to be male.
And she was going to the character was going to get killed off at the end as well.
Yeah, and the chest burster scene, one of the most iconic scenes, I think, in the history of cinema, and like you said, a genuine reaction as well. Ian Holm, obviously, as Ash in there. Obviously, he passed away, may he rest in peace. It's a great film, and I think Alien is a film it's certainly stood the test of time, and I think Aliens in '86 is a film that holds up to it very well. Obviously, there are contrasts to each other. One's a sci-fi horror film, one's essentially kind of a Vietnam film in space, but I think Aliens and Alien are both great films, just for different reasons. Great films in their own right.
Definitely, and that's a rare thing to have, because some of these films they try to be either try to replicate the original or try to be too different. However, it worked beautifully between these two films.
Yeah.
However, for me, it's all about Alien.
Did you have you ever learned what the original title? Do you know what the original title was going to be for Alien?
I couldn't say so. Please humour me.
Star Beast. I kid you not, the original title was going to be... I mean, that just screams B-movie. That just has B-movie written all over it. But the original... Thankfully, they changed it to the very simple and effective Alien. But yeah, Alien is a classic.
Not to mention its infamous tagline. In space,
no one can hear you scream.
Scream.
Certainly one of the most... Even if you've not seen Alien, I'd be like... what's going on there, but even if you've not seen it, most people know that tagline. The Xenomorph as well, to quickly mention, the Xenomorph was actually played by someone, an African man that was actually 7'2" as well, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? Because Kevin Peter Hall, that played the Predator in the first 2 Predator films, was actually 7'2" as well. What's the odds of that? But,
who'd have thunk?
Sorry?
Who'd have thunk?
Yeah, 7'2". Okay, second film on the list. Again, a film that I don't think really needs much of an introduction. It's certainly a film that everyone's heard of. 1975, it's the film that put Steven Spielberg on the Hollywood map. Hugely commercially successful movie, Jaws. I'll let you take this away. What's your thoughts on Jaws?
Well, I mean, it's the film that really changed Hollywood. It really brought us the blockbuster, and it's I mean, to go from Jaws to Jaws. I mean, in a way, there's some sense of it, of a monstrous sort of figure, if you like. However, Spielberg did the brilliant thing with arguing with the producers, saying, "No, we've got to keep the shark minimal. We can't introduce it until an hour into the film," and there are some bits now that even have such a profound effect on me. I struggle going back into the ocean because that film has had this effect on me.
Yeah, it gave great white sharks a bad rep. I mean, I know there's people out there that don't classify it as a horror film. To me, it has enough horror elements to it to certainly be considered one. You know, the iconic score courtesy of John Williams, which is so simple yet highly effective. The fact that it has jump scares, and I think most importantly, at its core, it's a monster movie. But in this case, the monster's a great white shark.
And of course, if you compare that to, things like other earlier films like Godzilla or even King Kong from 1933. These are monster films as well, and the monster genre is a subgenre of horror, so there is enough to justify. Plus, the grisliness, some of the scary scenes of the film are genuinely scary.
Well, I think yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with Jaws, it's again like Alien. I think less is more. I think that, because I know that Spielberg originally wanted the audience to see a lot more of the shark, but it wasn't made possible because of the mechanical shark, which was funnily named Bruce. Nice little nod to that, by the way, in Finding Nemo. The mechanical shark just kept malfunctioning, and it just wasn't possible. But I actually think that works in the film's favour, because you don't actually see much of the shark until towards the end of the movie.
And that benefits a lot more because, unfortunately, as the film's got older, some people have been really, really judgmental on it. And I've heard this from many people. Oh, the shark is fake. And I'm just like, this is an animatronic. You don't see much of it. And could you honestly tell me that computer graphics would have made it any better?
Yeah, the days long before CG, it was a hugely commercially successful. It's the first film to be classified as a blockbuster as well. I believe it was the first film to ever make over 100 million at the box office. I think it made over $300 million, which actually equates to over $1 billion now. It's a $1 billion making film.
I think it's about 1.5 billion.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a film that certainly is, like you say, put people off going into the water. I think what elevates Jaws above most other films of its type is the masterful direction by Spielberg, who proved that he could do suspense 4 years prior with Duel. 1971, which again is Duel is a good film. It's it's pretty suspenseful, but Jaws is certainly the film that made Spielberg known. And
it really does show the effectiveness that is with his cast as well, because you've got some killer stars: Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Richard Shaw, who delivers quite possibly one of the most haunting monologues in cinematic history. I can't believe he didn't get an Oscar nomination for that, because that is just
Robert
beautifully
executed.
Beautifully executed, and his death as well is not for the squeamish.
Robert Shaw's Quint was hell of a character, and that speech was just excellent. Jaws 2 was an okay sequel. Jaws 2 was watchable, and then unfortunately it just became 2 films too many. I mean, Jaws 4: The Revenge was completely and utterly abysmal. Probably the worst film of Michael Caine's career. I mean, that's the film that gave us a roaring shark, which isn't even possible.
And I remember, I think he won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for one of his films. I think it might have been The Cider House Rules, but he wasn't able to collect his Oscar because he was filming Angels of Revenge.
Yeah.
It's painful.
I know. Well, we're finally on to the last movie, I believe. And
that should be right.
Yep, this is a movie that it was certainly the commercial success of this film that actually helped to really popularise the slasher subgenre, released in 1978. Of course, it's Halloween. Now, Halloween is the film that really kind of got me into slasher films. I mean, it's a film that's so simple in concept, and yet, you know, it's perfectly executed. It's directed with a lot of finesse by John Carpenter. Obviously, he directed a couple of films prior, you know, Dark Star in 1974 and Assault on Precinct 13, you know, a couple of years before Halloween. But this is really the film that I feel made him. I mean, Halloween is, you know, it was a very low budget film, $320,000, and it actually went on to become the most successful independent film of all time when it came out. It showed that these small budget films can actually do good money at the box office. You know, and I think it made nearly, like I say, $70 million, and it kind of set the template. It kind of paved the way for, even though Black Christmas came out 4 years prior, Halloween kind of set the template. A lot of films to follow. I mean, Friday the 13th, you know, was backed by Paramount. Paramount looked at Halloween and they saw just how successful Halloween was, that these films can make cash. And I think Friday the 13th was the first slasher film to ever be backed by a major studio. What's your thoughts on Halloween?
I thought it absolutely incredible for its minimalist approach, and you know, it gave us Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, an absolutely terrific actress, and for better or worse, you know, it gave us the template for the majority of slasher films that would proceed onto it. On the one hand, you know, it showed that horror films were, you know, wasn't going anywhere. However, you know, there are some that were just somewhat unwatchable. However, you can't necessarily blame that on this film, though, because I mean, like, it gave us John Carpenter, who would then go on to do Escape from New York, and of course, The Thing.
Yeah. And there's a nice little foreshadowing, actually, because in Halloween, the film that Tommy and Lindsay are actually sitting there watching on TV is the original The Thing from Another World, which obviously John Carpenter would actually remake 4 years later with The Thing. So I love that little bit of kind of foreshadowing there. But yeah, I think what I love about Halloween is the emphasis on suspense. You know, it's very minimalistic on the gore. There's a very low body count, virtually no gore. It's a film that does rely heavily on the suspense and the atmosphere. Michael Myers is the boogeyman. He actually spends the majority of the film actually stalking his victims. And I think that John Carpenter actually relies heavily on the audience's anticipation. Where's Michael Myers going to come from next? He makes great use of the Panaglide, you know, using that kind of widescreen with all this kind of empty space, and Michael Myers can come into shot at any point. I think it was incredibly well made for its budget.
I think one of the greatest elements, though, I think has to be the score by Carpenter.
The score is, it's certainly one of the most iconic horror scores of all time, and it really complements the film perfectly, without a doubt. I mean, Carpenter actually made that film and actually took it to a few execs with no music, and people actually turned around and said, there's just nothing scary here. There's nothing scary going on. He took the film away, composed the score himself, and because obviously Carpenter has actually scored quite a few of his own films, and took it away, and the score really does add to that movie.
Seeing that you're the expert on this, considering there's 3 storylines to the future sequels, you have the Donald Pleasance versus Michael Myers. I know it's not his name, but it's the actor's name. You have him versus Michael Myers storyline. You have the other one with the sibling, I guess, aesthetic, as well as the Halloween 78 to Halloween 18 storyline. What are your thoughts on that? Considering you're the expert on this genre, this franchise.
Oh, now the Halloween franchise has been a very rocky road over the years. I enjoyed Halloween 2018. I didn't love it. I definitely had some issues with it, but I felt like it was in a way kind of a step in the right direction. But it's, I thought Halloween 2 was a good sequel that's not far off the first film, but the kind of timeline that I like personally was the Halloween 2, Halloween H2O. But then unfortunately, because I actually enjoyed Halloween H2O, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was very much in the mould of Scream. Scream come out, was hugely successful, and that's basically what kind of revived the Halloween franchise. But then, of course, Halloween Resurrection came out, and that ruined it. Because I thought Halloween H2O actually had a great ending. She decapitates Michael, the franchise is over. No. What do? They come up with this stupid, ridiculous, convoluted, it weren't Myers, it was a paramedic. So up until Halloween Resurrection came out, that's the timeline that I liked.
And what are your thoughts on the upcoming sequel, Halloween Kills?
I'm looking forward to it.
Did you see the teaser?
I have, yeah. I'm looking forward to it simply because I'm a Michael Myers fan. Do I think it's going to be a great movie? No, but Michael Myers is my favourite horror movie villain. I think, the whole, the history behind The Mask, Tommy Lee Wallace, who basically created the look of Michael Myers, he was looking for the cheapest mask he could find. He found a William Shatner mask, very little money. Spray painted it white, widened the eye holes, messed up the hair, and that's the look of Michael Myers. And created was a horror icon, played by Nick Castle in the original, who's still the best Michael Myers, I think, because there wasn't anything zombie-like him. He was just kind of a guy walking around normally and that. And, I had as you know, mate, I had the luxury of meeting Nick Castle. I believe it was the year before last that I actually...
Yeah, back in 2018. Yeah. Same year I met Lars Henriksen.
Yeah. But Halloween, again, the casting, like you say, it made a star in Jamie Lee Curtis. She became a scream queen. I don't think she really kind of cemented that role really until kind of Terror Train. But Halloween is the film that made her, without a doubt. Donald Pleasence. I mean, he was an already very established actor, very much a British thespian. I love Donald Pleasence. And he originally, he turned the film down. He didn't want it. He looked at the script, he weren't interested. And it took some arm twisting from his granddaughter that was actually a big fan of Dark Star, which was Carpenter's directorial debut. She convinced him to take the film. And then, of course, Christopher Lee, the horror legend. I'm not sure if you know this, but Christopher Lee turned it down as well. Now,
wow, I didn't. That is interesting. Kind of surprising, considering the man's done films with Jess Franco, films with next to no budget. So the fact that he turned down this is that I would love to have known why.
Yep, Christopher Lee. As we know, was one of the biggest horror icons in the history of cinema. He regretted it. He later said that it was the worst mistake of his career. I just don't think he saw Halloween as being a successful film, or he just didn't simply like the script. But even Donald Pleasence didn't. If it wasn't for his granddaughter, we wouldn't have got Donald Pleasence as Dr. Sam Loomis. PJ Souls was that. I mean, to be honest, right, with the sequel, the Halloween Kills, I think it's called, that's coming out, they're certainly playing on nostalgia for that movie as well. I think Charles Cyphers is back, that played Sheriff Brackett in the original. You've got the actor that played Tommy Doyle in the original. So they're certainly kind of relying on nostalgia. We'll see. The Halloween franchise has had, I think, more downs than ups. But as you know, Michael Myers, what I like about Michael Myers is that he seems to take as much pleasure in the stalk than he does the kill. Michael Myers seems to like to scare and stalk his victims, whereas Jason gets more in for the kill. Michael Myers is my favourite horror movie villain, and I think Halloween is I'm not necessarily saying do I think it's the best horror film of all time. I think it's one of, and I think it's certainly one of the most important, but it's certainly one of my favourite horror movies of all time.
It certainly has a massive significance to you. I think it's fair to say that the effect Halloween has on you is, I'd say it's actually stronger than, say, the effect the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has had on me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Texas Chainsaw, definitely. It's a film I love, but you definitely love Texas Chainsaw more than I do. That's your, I think that's your top film of the 70s, isn't it? Texas Chainsaw.
So where would you rank Halloween then in terms of your top 70s? If I had to press you into doing a proper top 10, where would you put Halloween?
Halloween probably would be number one. This is the weird thing. Halloween I've never found to be overly scary. I just love the film. I just love, certainly from a technical standpoint. Wes Craven actually said this. Wes Craven actually admires Halloween from a technical standpoint, but he doesn't actually love the movie. He doesn't love the film. But he understands the importance it had. Yeah, I mean, here's another little fact. I'm not sure if there's a lot of people that know this, but John Carpenter himself actually has a cameo of sorts in the original Halloween. He's actually the voice of Paul, Annie's boyfriend, on the telephone.
Oh, well, very Hitchcockian.
Yeah, when she gets a telephone call, it's Carpenter.
Sounds like, do you know what? For some reason, that just stretched back to a cameo Herschel Gordon Lewis had in Bloodfeast, but that's something else. Though I do love the cameos that these directors do. I do think John Carpenter pulls it off better than most, I would say. I know Lucio Fulci did a few cameos, but Carpenter, I think, much better.
Carpenter as well. The character of Laurie Strode was actually the name of Carpenter's girlfriend. His girlfriend prior to the movie. He actually had a girlfriend years ago called Laurie Strode. And that's where the character's name actually came from, because he was actually dating Deborah Hill at the time of the film being made. She was the producer of the movie. And little fact, in the opening point of view scene, you know, where young Michael's walking through the house, etc., the hands that you see grab the knife are actually Deborah Hill's, the producer's hands. She actually had tiny little hands which looked almost childlike. But yeah, I think the opening to Halloween really kind of set the tone for the film as well. Like getting back to Black Christmas, the whole point of view done throughout the house. I think it was masterfully done. But
definitely. It's that POV shot that, you know, that slasher films would try to replicate, would do miserably. However, it's interesting to think that you've got things like Black Christmas and Peeping Tom back in 1960, to go back to that again, that would use this approach and execute it so brilliantly. Yeah. It's a shame that not many films are able to sort of deploy that to really create a sense of air and unsettle the audience.
Yeah, there was certainly a hell of a lot. 1980, like Halloween kind of started the golden age. From 80, 81, 82, there were slasher films being churned out left, right and centre. And there are some good ones. There are some very good ones, but there was also a lot of not so good. You know, Halloween showed that these films could make cash, so, you know, every studio was kind of trying to make, you know, a low-budget slasher film, hoping it would be successful. And there were some good ones. That's for a later podcast. I think we can talk about underappreciated slasher films, some of the best slasher films of the era. But
challenge accepted.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much a wrap. I do believe that's all things wrapped up for this podcast. We've gone through all of our favourite 70s horror films. I'm hoping it's not been too traumatic for you listeners. If it is, then I do apologise. But that was good fun. It was absolutely fantastic having you here, Samuel.
Hey, the pleasure's all mine. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me for as long as this podcast shall live, or I'm stuck with you. I don't know which way.
There's always therapy, isn't there? There's always therapy. Yeah, shock
therapy.
Shock therapy. Yeah, I'm sure we can get through it. So thanks to everyone listening, and we'll be back again soon for the sequel. Take care and adios.
Thank you very much.